Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer. This is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. It's been a bit of a weird week, but we do have some news to cover, and then on the tail end of the show, I will be joined by Matt Miller to hear his thoughts on Unicorn Overlord. But first, just like I did last episode, we're starting with just me. So let's get into it. I started last week talking about the situation Game Informer is presently in with the dwindling staff and where that kind of left this show. So I had some time to hammer it out and iterate on my initial ideas and the deal with the irons in the fire that I told you about. And I wanted to give you all an update. But before I do that, I do want to thank each and every one of you who wrote in with kind words about all things Nintendo. The purpose of last week's episode wasn't to garner that kind of reaction, but I would be lying if I said it wasn't very much an appreciated side effect. Recording a podcast can be kind of strange sometimes because there are moments where I'm like, am I just sending these shows out into the void and wondering if anyone actually listens to them? So to have so much support in wake of last week's episode, hitting my email, Instagram DMs, the All Things Nintendo channel on the Game Informer community Discord, it meant so much to me. I was out in California again this week, and I got a couple of your messages on the flight out there, and it really took a lot for me to hold back my tears. It truly touched me how many of you reached out with kind words. So truly, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I was legitimately getting choked up by everything the folks who wrote in had to say. So if you did that, or you reached out in some other way, or even if you just continue to listen to All Things Nintendo in silence, thank you so much. It's because of the feedback that I hear from listeners of this show that the show is continuing, even if it's going to be a little bit different. So truly, without hearing from all of you, the recent changes that were made to our staff might have spelled the end of the show. Actually, let me rephrase that, because without hearing from all of you, the changes would have been the end of the show. And I feel confident in saying that you all are keeping this show alive as much as I am in this moment. Which brings me to the aforementioned changes. And I actually think that on the surface, they're going to affect me a lot more than they're going to affect you, but I'm still here to talk about it. My whole thing has been recently that with the ever-changing number of staff members available to Game Informer, every single member has had to wear an increasing number of hats. And with that, certain things have had to fall off, or more so, our work hours have just become increasingly cramped. We just have to do a lot more stuff during our working hours because we're just constantly trying to do a lot of other things that we need to do for our business. So because of that, recording All Things Nintendo during work hours has become increasingly more challenging. And I would say that with this recent change that we talked about last week, no longer viable. And for that reason, All Things Nintendo is going to become a standalone podcast. And to be clear, I'm still with Game Informer. That is not changing. Nobody else is leaving Game Informer. This is not any kind of abandoned ship scenario. It's just the options when I really looked at it was it either stops altogether or I record it outside of my work hours. So while I'm still with Game Informer, All Things Nintendo is becoming an independent podcast. And, this has always been a one-man operation in terms of booking, recording, hosting, and editing the show. But there are other things that the Game Informer staff has supported me throughout all of this show's run, being guests on the show, most notably, but also, the design team has worked to provide me images and logos and all that stuff. So it's going to fall to me even more to get this going and uploaded, but it's just something that it takes up my work days as it exists now. And I'm transitioning it to not take up my work days, but I wanted to keep this running because of all the people that wrote in and have told me over the past several months that they like the show. And I love it too. So I think this is a really, it's going to be a win-win for us all. And the current plan is to keep All Things Nintendo under the Game Informer umbrella through the rest of the month. Then once the calendar turns to April, we'll have a soft relaunch along with some modest changes to usher in this new era. And one of the irons in the fire, and the reason that I'm not just doing it immediately, is because I'm working on the technical side to try my best to make it so you will not have to find the podcast all over again. Your current subscription to this show should just automatically transfer over to the new independent feed. The lone exception of that will be if you listen to this show on YouTube, because as this will no longer be a Game Informer show, it will no longer be on the Game Informer show's YouTube channel, or new episodes won't be anyway. So instead, you'll have to find it on its own channel, which I will set up and get rolling here pretty soon. And once I have it all squared away, I will let you know where to find it. And I really want to circle back, and I want to emphasize that all of the support that I talked about earlier will be even more crucial as we roll forward, because this podcast will no longer have the backing of an established outlet. It's just going to be me. And as long as the support keeps going, the show can keep doing fun stuff week after week, and I'll continue to produce it. I even have designs on expanding the show out now that it's going to be an independent entity. But we're going to have to keep this going one step at a time for now. But just know that if things remain as good as they have been and they continue to grow even, we might have some pretty neat stuff on the horizon. But for now, I'm just looking forward to wrapping up this show's run under the Game Informer umbrella, charting out some new changes for All Things Nintendo, and then relaunching it under my own banner. And again, wouldn't be possible without every single person listening to this show, and particularly those who have ever reached out to me to either ask me a question for the Q&A episodes, tell me something they do like, tell me they don't like, something that was something I got wrong maybe. All of that tells me that people care about this show, they listen to this show, and it's the reason that this is continuing forward. So again, thank you all so much. I'm excited to take things to the next level starting in April, but we're going to keep going under the Game Informer umbrella for the next few weeks, and then we'll see where we go from there. But we're going to take our first break of this episode, and when we come back, we'll be chatting about the news that came out of this week. We will be right back. I would say this week mirrors last week's level of news, but minus the Pokemon Day livestream. All that to say, it was a pretty slow news week, but we have a few things to talk about before we transition to this week's main segment. Joining me for the news segment is Game Informer's Marcus Stewart. Marcus, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, but I won't lie, I'm a little disappointed that I wasn't on the Pokemon news there. Just purely for the sake, I should say, of preserving the streak.
Somebody in the Game Informer community Discord did mention that before the Pokemon Day livestream, saying, does this mean Marcus is a surefire appearance on this week's All Things Nintendo? And I said probably not.
Now listen, I didn't watch the show, but I had things to say.
Famed Pokemon fan Marcus Stewart, who hasn't played a game since, what, Red and Blue?
I mean, technically Platinum, but like that was like a weird one-off. But yeah, even between that and Red and Blue was like nothing. Or wow. I played some of Gold, but then it was stolen from me. And I actually blamed that thief for getting me out of Pokemon. Like he robbed me of my fandom, basically.
Wow.
So I never finished it, and he stole it.
robbed you of more than just the game. He robbed you of a potential life path.
Yeah, kind of like ripped my soul out. It's like the Shang Tsung of my childhood.
Your Pokemon fandom is mine.
Pretty much.
So I had a similar situation where somebody stole my Pokemon card. My Japanese Blaine's Arcanine was at a mall when I was a kid, and like it was like a Pokemon event in the middle of the mall. It was like not like a sanctioned thing. It was just like a bunch of kids who liked Pokemon just happened to have. And I was like, oh, let me go get my cards. So I ran out to the car, got my stack of my favorite cards, and I was showing them off. And this kid took my Arcanine and like just dipped, and we couldn't find him anywhere. And
Wow.
my dad and I like ran all over the mall looking for this kid.
Kid that you knew or random
No, it
kid?
was just a random kid, like because they were all like just like, oh, let's see your cards, let's see your cards. And then like he had them like under the table, and I didn't realize it because I was talking to another kid. And I guess while he had the cards under the table, he took the Blaine's Arcanine and like put the deck back in front of me, and then like just ran
Yeah, so
basically.
he's done this before. Like
Yeah,
that's a whole thing.
that was a pro move.
Yeah. Have you ever had the courage to like look up how much that card is worth today?
I almost bought another copy of it because, it was a Japanese version, and they have a lot of really cool card stores over in Tokyo, especially. And I saw the card, and it was only like, the equivalent of like probably $12 or $13.
Okay, that's
And
good. I would say it would be worse if you found out that card was like worth millions and you and that kid stole it from you. Like I would be punching walls.
I mean, I'm just punching the air constantly, Um, but I mean, I did have my Half-Life 2 playthrough stolen from me. My playthrough of what many considered at the time the greatest video game of all time.
Great game.
That was because somebody unplugged my console while I was playing it, and I just gotten through Ravenholm,
Wait,
which was
what do you mean unplug? Like you didn't see who did it? Like the plugs, not that.
no, it was an ex-girlfriend.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say. I was like, how do you not know who did this?
I was trying not to put somebody on blast, but
I'm not
yeah,
saying you gotta say her name, but you
I
know
was,
who you are, ex-girlfriend. If you're
I was in
listening.
college, and I was like, well, she was trying to have a conversation with me, and I was like, well, let me get to the a part where I can save or something. I don't know if you could
Wait,
save
couldn't
on the
you
fly.
pause the game?
Yeah,
It's
but
not a Dark Souls game.
I was 18. Okay, give me a break.
That might be on you, Brian.
I'm just saying. It got unplugged. I hadn't saved for like an hour and a half, and I was like, well, I'm not going back to that game.
I
So
mean, listen, not a cool move. The unplug, the console. That's never cool. But you could have paused the game,
look, we
Brian.
live and we learn, Marcus. That's all I'll say. But we do have a very sad story to talk about here. We can't really do this news segment or start it off really in any other way than to pay tribute to an absolute legend that we lost this week, and that is Akira Toriyama. He best known as the creator, writer, and illustrator of the Dragon Ball manga, but also had an incredible impact on the video game industry. He is also the writer and illustrator of Sandland, which is getting a game later this year. And then he did the character designs for the Dragon Quest series, which, that's a huge indelible mark on the industry. And then also character and setting designs for Chrono Trigger, character designs for Blue Dragon, which was an Xbox exclusive RPG. And then he did some work on Fantasian as well, which was the Apple Arcade exclusive game from Hironobu Sakaguchi's studio, aka the creator of Final Fantasy, and also, creator of Blue Dragon. So, what was your favorite Toriyama creation?
Oh, Dragon Ball, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Like Dragon Ball was my I almost want to say in some ways almost my gateway anime. Even though I watched like the Pokemon anime growing up and like stuff like Digimon, I that was still a time where I didn't really know what anime was. Like to me, cartoons were just cartoons. You know what I mean? And I didn't know there was like a distinction, or like a cultural difference. And I feel like Dragon Ball was the first one because I remember going to some friend's cousin's house and he was hanging out with a bunch of older kids. Like they were like high schoolers and I was like in like early middle school. And they had a bunch of the tapes of like the Dragon Ball Z tapes and stuff. And they were watching them. And that was the first time I remember seeing it. I was just saying, I had no idea what was happening. I think we were watching like the Namek saga and they're like, oh, this like people are flying around, like shooting energy out of their hands. Like, this is cool. I have no idea what's happening, but this seems pretty cool. And then when Toonami started, that was when I got into it like proper and watched all of Z and classic Dragon Ball, and like I've seen all the animes, GT, Super,
Wow.
the movies. Like I love Dragon Ball, and actually I had a spree where because a lot of people don't notice about me, but I like to draw, or like, and I used to draw a lot when I was younger. Like I was really good at it, and I had a phase where like I would draw Dragon Ball stuff like constantly. Like I would either print out pictures and like recreate them, like just redraw them myself, or I would just draw my own stuff. But I got like really good at sort of replicating Toriyama's style, and I still have a sketchbook somewhere that has like nothing but those drawings in it of like,
Oh my
oh, here's
gosh.
Super Saiyan 3 Goku, and here's all the Goku, Gohan, and Goten shooting a Kamehameha together, and like a bunch of stuff. So Dragon Ball is still to this day like one of my all-time favorite just pieces of media. Basically, like I adore the show. I adore the characters, the world. It has made an impact on my life for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my introduction into Dragon Ball was actually the Budokai games. And I remember renting them, I think it was from Blockbuster, and playing through them. And like, they had the storylines laid out, like where it was like you could experience like the most truncated version of the entire like original Dragon Ball Z run, like all the way through like the Cell stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being like, this is the coolest thing ever. You get to play through all these sagas. And it got me to go back and watch some of the anime. And I watched, a decent chunk of the original Dragon Ball Z run. But, I always just really loved like the overarching stories. I think sometimes the animes maybe got lost in the we need to recap the events of past episodes a little too much at times, but the overarching stories and overarching narratives were just so much fun to follow. And then of course, like, the influence that the concept of Dragon Ball Z and like going Super Saiyan and Kamehamehas and everything were just, it's permeated so much. Like there's no way that anybody can deny, even though they try, that Sonic and like Super Sonic is not inspired by Dragon Ball Z and the concept of Super Saiyan.
Right. You'd be a fool to to not see that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing maybe people that only know Dragon Ball from like the outside don't realize like how much of a cultural impact it's had. Like beyond that, like I'll watch things now where there will be so many subtle references to Dragon Ball, either in terms of like something vaguely resembling Super Saiyan or just like the verbiage of like power levels or stuff. Like it is a like an institution,
It really
at this
is.
point, and like not just in Japan but just internationally. I mean, it's the first and I think still only manga slash anime that has a Macy's Thanksgiving float.
Wow.
like that is like unheard of. But like the last few years, there's always a Goku float, and that's like that in the States that's like huge.
Yeah.
So yeah, and of course like just myriad of video games, like, and especially in terms of like Nintendo stuff specifically. Like I used to really like the Legacy of Goku games on Game
Hmm.
Boy Advance. Those are like some really good RPGs that I wish we could get those on like the Switch Online. But
That would be a nice tribute.
yeah, I don't know who owns the. I assume that's Bandai Namco. I don't know why we can't re-release those or something. But like I used to play the Budokai games too, like you did. Like those were huge for me when those came out. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot I thought was good, and of course Dragon Ball Fighters I think to me is the best Dragon Ball fighting game ever made.
Yeah.
Maybe the best Dragon Ball game ever made, just overall. Uh, and I'm psyched for what was it, Sparking Zero coming out? Like so many video games, like countless number of video games, and just again like you mentioned Toriyama, like Chrono Trigger, one of my all-time favorite games in general. That Toriyama art style. I specifically love the PlayStation port of it that added those cutscenes for the first time, like the animated cutscenes. Like I think to me that is the best version of Chrono Trigger because of those.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just it's weird. Like this is like super sucky for me because like it wasn't that long ago that we lost the Yu-Gi-Oh creator, which is another like really big anime like property or manga property for me too.
Hmm.
So to have kind of both of them gone within the span of like 2 years is just like, geez, okay,
Yeah.
uh, you know.
I mean, it's just really sad. He was only 68 years old, which is, way too young, and just an immense legacy. And even like I said, like the video game impact outside of like the influence and everything. He did the character designs for Dragon Quest, and you can look at Dragon Quest and be like, oh yeah, this is definitely Toriyama, just all over it. Like the iconic slimes are from him.
I mean, that's one of the reasons that I got into like I haven't gotten into Dragon Quest at nearly as much as I have Final Fantasy. But like I remember like Dragon Quest 8 was my first one, which I think is a great game. And part of the charm of playing that, as well as Chrono Trigger and anything else that he's touched, is that art style. Like it feels like familiar and like that warm blanket of like, oh yeah, like I know this. Like this is Toria. Like look at those eyes and the hair. Like you see that and you're like, yeah, I already like this by default because I love his art style and it reminds me of like happy memories with Goku and the crew. So like I've always appreciated the times he has like delved into games because it almost feels like in some ways like an extension of Dragon Ball, even if it's like not Dragon Ball at all, just because of the art style.
Did you ever play Blue Dragon?
I haven't, and that's been like one of my biggest like piles of shame games because I have the game. Like I've owned a physical copy of Blue Dragon for like ever now, and I've just never been able to make time to play it.
That's another one of those games where you look at it and you're just immediately like, oh, that is Toriyama.
Yeah, like I remember getting the Game Informer cover story for it and being so excited because it's like, oh, Toriyama, like new RPG, like it's gonna be like the next Chrono Trigger or something. Like this looks cool. And like and seeing the art style in 3D and whatever, like it looks charming and it's something that's like on my like see I get to make a Dragon Ball reference. Like if I in my hyperbolic time chamber, if I had something like that to just have unlimited time to play games, especially backlog stuff, that's one that would absolutely be towards the top of the list.
Yeah, and we have a Toriyama joint coming out in a month now, right?
Yeah, I guess a few things. Even like the stuff that because we have Sandland, which is that comes out the 26th of April, which is based on a manga that he started in 2000. That I guess isn't as big as Dragon Ball, but it's something that I had never heard of Sandland until that game announcement. And
It's getting more popular for sure.
Yeah, like it got an animated movie like a year or two ago that I'm planning to watch in the near future. But yeah, that's coming out. We mentioned Dragon Ball Sparking Zero coming out at some point in the future. I mean, Dragon Quest 12 is still floating out there somewhere. And then the announcement message from his production company, Bird Studio, mentioned that he had a ton of other stuff that he was in the middle of working on that is unfinished. So that probably takes various forms. It would not surprise me if there were other video games in the works, Dragon Ball or otherwise, that I guess we'll see what happens with those. So yeah, I mean, the guy was working till the end. Like he was a busy dude.
Yeah, and I know that other members of our staff also felt this loss. I know Kyle and Alex are both huge Toriyama fans. When I was out in Tokyo with Alex back in December for this past trip for the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth cover, we went to Akihabara, and Alex was like just over the moon excited because we went into a bookstore and he found like kind of like a collected works of Toriyama on the Dragon Ball series, and he bought it immediately and he was like, this is amazing, like Toriyama is so important to me. And like I saw he also posted a tweet about how important Toriyama was to kind of just his life trajectory in general. So this is a big loss. He's a very important figure in the history of both manga and video games, and by extension of the manga anime. So yeah, just rest in peace, Akira Toriyama.
Yeah.
68 years old, and what a legacy.
Yeah, I was gonna say real quick that I just remembered that this is a really nerdy fun fact about me is that I work out and I've been working out more this year, but like generally I usually do. And the way I kind of like frame that in my mind to get me to do it, so like saying you're like exercising kind of sounds like work. or like I don't know, it can have like a negative connotation to some people. So I've always said like if I'm going to gym, like I'm gonna go to the gym to train because that's what they use in Dragon Ball. Like whenever they go like fight each other to get ready for like something or to get strong, they're like, we're gonna go train. And that always seems cool to me. Like as a kid, like, oh, I want to go train. So like that's still like when I think of like let's go training, I think of Dragon Ball. And that makes me more pumped to like, yeah, let's go to the gym and let's see how much higher we can raise our power level by doing some squats. I don't know.
See, my only crossover with anime when I go to the gym is the fact that I use egg weights, they're called, which are basically weights that you hold in your hand, and when you shadow box, it's heavier. So
Mm,
like they fit in the palm of your hand. So it's very Rock Lee esque.
okay.
So yeah, when I do like boxing workouts that don't involve bags, like if I'm just doing shadow boxing, I'll hold that. But yeah, yours is much cooler.
I'll also listen to like I love Dragon Ball theme songs on my playlist too. So how can you not get pumped up when you hear like those Dragon Ball themes playing?
Oh, anime music is so good for
Bruce
working out.
get the Bruce Falconer like Cell Games music going, and you will lift quadruple what you're capable of.
Wow, ringing endorsement from Marcus Stewart.
There
Well,
you go.
we're gonna move on as best we can. This is gonna kind of hopefully cheer us up a little bit because last week we learned of a brand new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, and this week we got another one. And it was actually revealed exclusively by yours truly. It
Mm.
was part of the history of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in video games feature that I wrote in the new issue of Game Informer. I was also able to secure the exclusive reveal of a new game that was, I guess, announced in some capacity, but we didn't know any details about it. All we knew was that it was following up the story of the Mutant Mayhem movie that came out last year. And not only did I get the first screenshots and the first details, but I also was able to reveal the name of it, which is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutants Unleashed. And it is a 3D brawler platformer, and it's by a Heart Full of Games. That is the developer name, which I'm not really familiar with their work. It looks like they've done some other licensed properties, but there'll be, according to them, there's going to be immersive environments to explore both above ground and in the sewers, and looks like 2-player co-op. So, did you see Mutants Unleashed or Mutant Mayhem? I should say.
Yeah, I love that movie.
That was a very good movie. I had a lot of fun with that. Um, I I'm eager to see another movie. I don't know how I feel about the story being followed up in a game. I'm assuming it's going to be like one of those like sitcom episodes where something happens and then we end up at the exact same place that we left or that we entered the episode in, where it's like,
Yeah.
all right, well, people who don't play video games can see movie number 2 and not feel lost at all.
It'll be the Enter the Matrix of Ninja Turtle games.
It might be. So that game comes out later this year on Switch and nearly every other platform. And you know what? If you want to learn more about TMNT and its history with video games, you can check out this month's issue of Game Informer or go to GameInformer.com to read a portion of my interview with Ninja Turtles co-creator Kevin Eastman. We got on the topic of the upcoming Last Ronin game, which unfortunately does not appear to be coming to Switch. However, still a fun read nonetheless, talking about why they decided to make a game out of that instead of going another route. But yeah, go check that out, GameInformer.com, or read the new issue of Game Informer for an 8-page in-depth look at the history of Ninja Turtles in video games.
Yeah, Brian, have you seen that this is there's another Ninja Turtles game coming out this year too? Like this is technically the second Turtles game we're getting.
Yeah, I
Is it
talked about it last week's episode, and I can't recall the name. It's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade something, right?
Wrath of the Mutants that
Wrath of the Mutants. So
Game
it's
Mill is making?
yeah, so it was it's a port of the arcade game that they made, I think, in 2017 or 2018,
Yeah.
similar to how they did Cruise and Blast, where they had that. It's the same development company, actually, headed up by Eugene Jarvis, and basically they made these arcade games, and now Game Mill is like, well, why don't we keep them in arcade? Why don't we bring them to to consoles and we can sell these with like extra content and everything? And it's interesting because it does have the old cartoon animation style, like the one
Mm.
that's no longer running because
Yeah,
they've
the Nickelodeon one, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's coming out this year as well. And yeah, there's a lot of Ninja Turtle stuff getting cranked out right now. And you know what? If it follows the same quality as like what we got with Shredder's Revenge or even the Cowabunga collection, like I'm all for it. I just hope that it's not spreading the brand too thin and having low quality development cycles, we'll say, in
Yeah.
terms of like putting out games by maybe companies that aren't equipped to do it. I don't know anything about a heart full of games, but I hopefully they have a good team working on it, and it sounds like Kevin Eastman is consulting with the Last Ronin developers, so I'm hoping that means he's also working with the developers behind Mutants Unleashed, because that would be great to have him working with them. He's been working with a lot of the game developers. Something I learned talking to him about the history of TMNT games was that he consulted with Konami in the earliest games to like make sure that everything was represented well. So hopefully that bodes well for this project.
Yeah. I mean, we went from getting no Turtles games at all to suddenly getting like all of the Turtles games. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not complaining as a lifelong Turtles fan. So, hopefully these are all like of at least exceptional quality. But yeah, I'm just happy to see like TMNT making a comeback in general in such a big way.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing to see. I say it in kind of like the masthead of this issue, but like before I was a Mario or Sonic or Zelda fan, I was a Ninja Turtles fan. Like that was like my first real obsession in like fandom that I was a part of was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So the fact that I was able to write that feature and like working with Kevin Eastman and everything on getting like the history of it and also get those exclusive reveals was kind of a dream come true moment. So I'm very happy that it's also making a comeback. That's amazing. It would be great to just write a feature on the history of the Turtles, but to be able to also spin it forward and talk about what's next for the franchise is something that I'm really happy that we're able to do. And not just be like, okay, yeah, the games that came out in 89 and 1991 were amazing, but it's all been garbage since then. It's like, no, they also had a few other really good games in the 90s, and then even more recently, like I said, Shredder's Revenge was awesome, and Cowabunga Collection was great. So hopefully we have some momentum going into these three other titles that we know are coming now.
Yeah. And when do we get Venus de Milo back in the series?
I couldn't tell you, but I could tell you, well, we might have some Mario news because March 10th each year is called Mario Day, and you know the reason behind this, right?
Wait, say it again?
March 10th each year, Mario Day. You know the reason
Oh,
behind that?
right. Because it's March 10, it looks like it looks like Mario. When
Yeah,
you
MAR
write.
10.
Well, if you cut out the CH and then you replaced it with the 10, then yes, it looks like
Yeah,
Mario. So
because
there's some work involved.
Pokemon Day, it's just because that's when the games hit first in Japan, which makes sense. That's the first time that Pokemon was available to buy anywhere. Mario Day, very different kind of celebration because it's like, oh yeah, these letters of the calendar look like Mario if you put them together and cut out some letters.
Yeah, like again, you got to do some work. But
To be fair, MAR is a typical abbreviation of March. But anyway,
sure.
in the past, we've gotten some collaboration announcements. We've had a couple of announced games that have come out, like Mario 35, or I think Mario Day was when they announced that collection, the Mario 3D All Stars, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe I think that actually might have been later in the year because I feel like it was after COVID hit
Yeah, I
that
don't
we
remember.
got that announcement. Because I remember doing like the Instagram live streams that I would do every single Friday before this podcast existed. I would get on Game Informer's Instagram live, and we would just do like question and answers from the community, and I would always have another guest on. And people kept asking about that, and I remember doing it from my dining room table. So I wouldn't have done that before COVID. So it must have been after COVID hit. So it was not Mario Day that we learned about that, but we have gotten some announcements in the past, and there are a couple of games on the horizon that we don't know very much about. And a known leaker named Pioro has been suggesting that we'll be getting some details on those this weekend. I am seeing this over on NintendoLife.com. Pioro seems to be hinting on his Twitter account that Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door and Luigi's Mansion 2 HD will be getting new information on Mario Day.
Oh man, I completely forgot about that Thousand Year Door
The
port.
remaster, yeah.
Yeah, whatever they're calling it. Yeah. Oh, okay.
And then also separately, Lego has been teasing something for Mario Day, and there have been some leaks that suggest that there are going to be 9 Mario-related sets coming this year. So I would imagine we will learn something about a few of those at least on
Yeah.
Mario Day.
I think I saw Nintendo or Mario account, I think it was Nintendo, tweeting some sort of giveaway for the Lego sets that are doing on Mario Day.
I don't know.
It might. I think it's the existing sets, but they're doing something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, outside of those, do you have any predictions for what we might get?
It's weird. Like, I was trying to think in my mind because I always forget that Mario Day exists until Mario Day happens. Like, oh yeah, Mario has a day. They have like their own in-7 day, basically.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to remember, like, has anything of like real note come out of those, or is it more just like a hey, Mario's cool kind of a day? Don't expect anything serious. I was trying to like measure any expectations based on that, but like, because we already got Wonder. And now that you've reminded me of Paper Mario, it's like, yeah, I guess you could do that here. Why not? Otherwise, I guess you save it for. I mean, we're creeping towards like June time. I guess you could save it for that, but I guess it depends when they're going to release it. So I could see one or both of those, like that and Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, getting something there, like maybe a trailer or something.
Is there any chance that we get Mario Galaxy 2 finally on Switch?
Absolutely not.
All right.
I'm sorry to stomp on everyone's dreams, because I would love that too. I think the Galaxy games are the best 3D platformers ever made. No, I mean, it would be nice if they also just said like, hey, remember that the 3D All Stars? We're just gonna put that back on sale because it's weird that we're not making money on this.
Now, wait. Hear me out. 3D All Stars back on the market alongside $15 DLC that adds Mario Galaxy 2 to the collection.
Sure, $15 seems pretty steep. But
you think so? When the whole collection is $40, right?
Well, if you did, I guess if you're doing the math, what does that mean? Each game costs? It's $40 divided by 3.
$12.50, right? Something like that.
Sure, mathematicians, let us know.
Sound off in the comments.
It's like slightly more expensive, so I guess it's not like absurd. I mean, I would take it. I just would like Mario Galaxy 2 on Switch. I don't understand why it's not there, especially after how long it's been since 3D All Stars came out. You're like, oh, surely they'll just add that in a year later or something, right?
You would think so.
No chance. So I don't know. Maybe unless it's weird. Unless they want to do something more to that game, but it's not like it's dramatically different than the previous Galaxy.
No.
See, I don't know. I'd take it.
I think that's the highest we have to hope for in the Mario Day announcement. This isn't like Pokemon Day where it's like, this is where we're going to learn about the next generation of Pokemon,
Yeah, the next generation of Mario.
We're not going to learn about like Mario Odyssey 2 during Mario Day. We're going to learn about something like the Mario 3D World coming, or Mario 3D All-Stars coming back to Switch online or whatever. And then I think that the DLC of Mario Galaxy 2, so like a re-release of a game that people really like, is the highest ceiling that Mario Day announcements have. That said, I also think that's very unlikely.
Yeah, that sounds I mean, has it been it's been about a year almost since the Mario movie came out, right? Like, wasn't that like April?
Yeah, it has been.
Do you think they do something with that? Like, nothing like new, but just saying like, hey, it's just us counting our money over the last year, basically, and saying how good this movie was, and you should still go see it. Like, I don't know. For some reason, I could see them doing something, just mentioning like, hey, it's been 1 year since the Mario movie came out. Pretty cool, huh?
They just, thank you. Please give us more money.
Yeah, like we're still. It's just like Miyamoto up to his neck in just a pile of money. Like all you see is his head, like he's buried in the sand.
A live stream of Miyamoto doing a Scrooge McDuck-like dive into a giant vat of money.
He's just got like Mario swim trunks on.
Got to play the underwater theme then.
Yeah, I mean, you have to legally, yes. You know, it would be even funnier if they decided that this was the day to say, hey, by the way, I don't know, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess coming to Switch. We're just going to do that now.
I actually thought of that and I steered away from it because I didn't want to harp on it too much. But yeah, that would be very funny if they announced that was happening on Mario Day of all days. I just looked over at my picture of Miyamoto with Miyamoto, and like I feel like he gave me a disappointed look when I mentioned that. But all right, let's
So
move
because
on.
of you, he's pushed that back another couple years. He's like, every time someone asks me about this, I delay it a year.
We have another announcement that is from the world of Mario. We have a demo for Princess Peach Showtime.
Hey!
So it's available now and lets you use Sword Fighter Peach and Patisserie Peach. And we also get a 5-minute long overview trailer, which I don't think really told us too much that we didn't already know. But Princess Peach Showtime, getting closer.
Yeah, did they give this demo a name? Because it seems like if I was marketing this, I would call it the opening act.
Ooh, that's good.
You know, just saying, Nintendo, hire me as a marketer.
No, don't do that. Then we can't use you here.
I can do both.
Okay.
Yeah, Miyamoto, we're tight like that. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to download this, but I would like to give it a try because I haven't had a chance to play it at all. I didn't go to that big event. Have you had a chance to dig into it?
I haven't. I really want to because it looks like a really cool game.
Yeah.
But and it looks like one of the weirder games that Nintendo has done with the Mario, like, character-driven games.
Yeah, the Mario cinematic universe.
The Mario's... Yeah, I guess, I don't know. Mario Cinematic Universe is a different thing now.
Extended Mario universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, which is cool. Like, I've always think that they should leverage their other characters more with, like, games. Like, I will always hold out for a Waluigi game till the day I die.
And get Waluigi and Smash Brothers, at least on the main roster. So keep on holding out hope.
Yeah, or at least a Wario and Waluigi. Like, just do the brothers game and make it like a twisted version of Super Mario Brothers. But Princess Peach is cool too. I liked Super Princess Peach. The thematic elements maybe have not aged great, but like as a game, I liked it, like as a platformer. And I've always again been like, how come we never got another Princess Peach game? Like, it's not like people don't like Princess Peach. She's like a big star in her own right. So to see this again and for them to do something completely different with her is always cool. So yeah, I want to check this out. I've had my eye on this game for a good while. So
yeah, and I mean, I've mentioned this a few times, but like the timing is perfect for this, right? Like, it seems like coming off the Mario movie, where that movie made so much money and so many people saw it. It makes sense to have all these games utilizing the kind of expanded Mario cast. We got Mario Wonder, which had an enormous selectable roster. Then we have Princess Peach Showtime. So, Peach was more of an action star than anything else in that one. I mean, there was a kind of a moment where Mario was like, we got to go rescue Peach. But, she was an action star more than a damsel in distress by a long shot. So it makes sense to have her own game. Donkey Kong was also one of the main characters in there, so it makes sense that we would have Mario versus Donkey Kong. I still think that there's got to be a Donkey Kong centric game coming out in the for like Switch 2. That's one of my predictions, is that one of the launch titles for Switch 2 will be a Donkey Kong game.
I would love a new DK Country.
Whether it's country or a 3D platformer or something,
like a 64 sequel.
I mean, hopefully not with that many collectibles, but it would be great to see Donkey Kong Country or Donkey Kong in general step back into the spotlight. And I think we got a little taste of that with Mario versus Donkey Kong getting remade. We have Luigi's Mansion 2 HD coming out. So, they're kind of starting to plant those seeds of like, let's really leverage the expanded Mario cast, because all these people are now really familiar with Luigi and Peach. And I'm surprised we haven't, I mean, I guess we already got Captain Toad, but like, there's a lot of characters that Nintendo can really leverage now that Mario is a very successful multimedia brand and not just a very successful gaming brand.
Yeah,
And
I
also,
wonder because they're on a spree of remakes. I almost wonder, like, do you think they would ever remake like the first Donkey Kong Country?
oh my god, I would lose my mind. It's already on Switch Online, like all three of the Donkey Kong Country games are, right?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I would lose my mind if they did a remake of like even just like any of the Donkey Kong Country, like the original ones. I would lose my mind if they just put out Donkey Kong Country Returns on modern platforms because
Game's
that's
great.
relegated to the Wii and the 3DS. It's not even available on like the Wii U. Tropical
Yeah.
Freeze is the only one that they've moved over.
Yeah, I've always had this in my mind that I feel like if Retro didn't have to take over the Metroid Prime 4, like, or just Metroid Prime 4 from, I forgot, was it CyberConnect 2 that was originally doing it?
Was it
Uh,
Bandai? I don't know.
yeah, like if that hadn't happened, I can't. I always feel like we would have gotten a new Donkey Kong game on the Switch if they weren't busy with Metroid.
Yeah, they. I mean, I honestly think they would. I would not be surprised if there was some utilization of Rare
Hmm.
because Microsoft and Rare and Nintendo have been kind of they've been kind of like working together on some stuff lately, right? You know, we just got the
Yeah.
Rare games come over to Nintendo Switch Online. We had the agreement with GoldenEye coming to both Xbox and Switch at the same time. I mean, it might be a long shot because Rare has a lot of other stuff that they're working on, but you know, a lad can dream.
Yeah, like
Or
they seem cordial. Emails have been exchanged.
what about Playtonic, the studio that was founded by former Rare developers? You know,
Yeah, the ukulele team.
the ukulele team. They put out the Impossible Lair, which is basically a spiritual successor to Donkey Kong Country by the people who made Donkey Kong Country.
True.
So I think that either of those would be great fits, and I think that those people would jump at the chance. I know Kev Bayless, who was the art director and also like the guy who did the character design of Diddy Kong and a lot of the animals and everything in Donkey Kong Country. He still shares a lot of Donkey Kong Country stuff from, and you know, he also did because Donkey Kong Country was the first time that we saw this current version of Donkey Kong, right?
Yeah.
Like before that, it was like the DK Jr. design that was just called Donkey Kong.
Right. The one that
Um,
we don't talk about, I
yeah,
guess, as
he
much.
just he's the forgotten son at this
Needs
point.
needs a tie.
So I think that they would not hate the idea of working on that again. So
What are they doing now too? They've been quiet since that ukulele game. I don't think they've put out anything
I
since
don't
then either.
have they. I don't know.
And
I mean,
that was a good while. That was pre-pandemic, if I remember
what
correctly.
an announcement that would be, though, if they're like, "Here's another Donkey Kong Country game, modern visuals, everything." I mean, don't get me wrong, Retro has done an amazing job, but like you had indicated, like they might be a little tied up in getting Metroid Prime 4 out the door. So the next best thing would be to have Playtonic do it.
Why not?
I mean, I don't know. Again, might be a long shot, but that's something that I would definitely not be opposed to.
Or, if they weren't owned by Sony, I would just make the joke of like you get Blue Point to do a Donkey Kong Country remake, and it just looks as beautiful as like the Demon Souls and Shadow of the Colossus remakes they did.
Those games do look beautiful. I love that Shadow of the Colossus remake.
So yeah, Sony scooped them up though. So
Hey, good news, Marcus.
what's up?
We have a new entry into the age-old executives don't know what they're doing catalog.
Oh, nice. I was getting worried.
So this comes from JB Perrette, or Peretti, CEO of global streaming and games at Warner Brothers.
Okay, they're doing pretty good right now, I hear.
He was at a Morgan Stanley conference and said that the company was going to double down on live service titles.
Oh, I wonder why.
Specifically, he called out Hogwarts Legacy and said the company is less interested in one and done games and wants games where players can live in and come back to time and time again.
Right, the famously live service multiplayer Hogwarts Legacy that definitely wasn't the best-selling game of last year.
So he called that out basically as an example of what they don't want to do. But let's look at the
Oh,
stats
make
here.
money.
Look at the stats. Hogwarts Legacy sold more than 22 million copies last year, making it the best-selling game of 2023.
Yeah.
Was a huge success, scored really well. Players who played that game really loved it. Zero live service elements, no multiplayer to speak of, as far as I know. Meanwhile, the company's most recent big title anyway, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, by Warner Brothers' own admission, was underwhelming from a sales perspective. And there are problems with that game that extend beyond the live service things. But the thing that people harped on in the lead up to it that probably contributed to a lot of those underwhelming sales numbers was the shoehorned in live service aspects. And also look at Mortal Kombat 1. There's some problems with that game too. But the thing that I think people are also like, this kind of sucks, is the live service elements. The I forget what the mode is called, but like the one that operates on a seasonal structure that you have to play through like all the different kinds of battles. Like that just got really repetitive and had all these currencies I didn't want to engage with, and it just seems like all the stuff that Warner Brothers does well. And also look at the sentiment around Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League and compare that to the other games that Rocksteady has put out, the Arkham games that were single player titles, not live service. They got DLC, but they were not live service games. The sentiment is just night and day.
Oh yeah, it's I have not finished Suicide Squad, but I'm like I'm towards the end of it. Like I'm just gonna push through and finish it because I'm just too close. But like every time I play the game, I always just can't ask myself like, is this truly the game that Rocksteady wanted to make? Like,
That's
is
the
this
thing.
because there's
Executives.
so much cool stuff in there that is like of that studio. Like you go like, oh yeah, this feels like Rocksteady, this part. But then you get to like the weird live service stuff and the 19 different currencies that I could not tell you the name of any of them. And you go like, did they really think that, like, is this really what they wanted? Like they sat down and said, like, yeah, this is cool. This is, nobody will get mad at this. This will be great, you know? And yeah, just this report is so frustrating because it's like, I don't understand how maybe executives' minds work sometimes, but just like by pure common sense, you just look at that and you go like, okay, this thing, we're seeing these numbers, so let's do the exact opposite of what people are telling us what they want, more or less, you know?
Well,
And
because they
granted,
look over at games like Helldivers and Fortnite and Destiny, who have just had an extremely long, successful run as a live service game, and they think, oh, let's just do that. That makes a lot of money. But what they neglect to realize is that for every Destiny success story, there are probably 10 or 15 just complete flops that were dead on arrival. Like, look at Anthem. Who would
oh
have
yeah,
thought that Anthem, a game that looked really cool on the surface, had the pedigree of BioWare behind it, which, you have to remember, they are hot as fire coming off of the Mass Effect trilogy and Dragon Age Inquisition. They go into Anthem, an all new IP, and it just immediately floundered to the point that it was dead on arrival. Avengers, another thing. There was no brand hotter than Marvel at that point. That was right after the Infinity Saga had concluded, and that couldn't even find its footing.
yeah.
So,
And those games aren't like, or at least like something like Suicide Squad. Like it's not even a matter of like, oh, this is like a broken game or anything like that. It's like live service, like just as a term, has become so reviled with a certain sect of gamers where like it poisons the well immediately
yeah,
when you mention like of like goodwill, like because Suicide Squad, you go like, oh, we're making a Suicide Squad game, you're like, oh cool, like Suicide Squad, that's a cool property, we've never really gotten a game with them, I want to see what that is. And you go like, it's live service, and you go like, how many times have we seen that happen where someone mentions live service and you see the comments and they go like, oh, all my interest is gone, I don't
yeah,
care what
because
this,
it
I
starts
don't care
feeling
what
like
this
a
is anymore.
chore.
Yeah, you're like, and people are just like that belief of like, well, we have to make as much money, or we want to have a game as successful as Destiny or Fortnite and so on and so on. But I think a lot of them don't realize like those games came out before live service just became a tired thing. Like they got in when the getting was good, basically, when we weren't just like inundated with live service games left and right, and people were still kind of like, I guess, warm to the idea. Whereas like now, I think there's like just fatigue with just the blueprint, where again, you like the moment you go like, this is a live service game, a lot of people just tune out, or like, and now you're fighting an uphill battle no matter how good the game might be. And Helldivers 2 is I feel like Helldivers 2 is more of an anomaly
Yeah.
than anything, and it helps that that game is great, but it's it's also piggybacking off. It's a sequel to something that was already in that format anyway, so it wasn't like a new thing. So it's like I don't know if you can look at that and see like, see, people do still like live service because this thing is coming out. It's like, well, that's a sequel to an existing live service game, so it's like people already knew what that would be. Basically, it's not like you announce like we're making another Harry Potter game and people are like, oh hell yeah, and you're like, but this one's gonna be live service. Like I guarantee you, people are gonna be like, yeah, I guess I'll just go play Hogwarts Legacy.
Exactly.
I'll play that
And
one now.
like you said, it just reeks of like things like Suicide Squad, where there are good game. There's a good game buried underneath a lot of live service BS,
Yeah.
and it just reeks of executives continuing to make decisions for creatives. And the way it's going to swing back is, guess who's going to ultimately pay the price if this strategy that the executives may or may not be forcing on the creatives fails? Because let's just say, I'm already extremely worried for Rocksteady's future following these early sales numbers of Suicide Squad.
Oh yeah.
Meanwhile, I don't have any concerns that the executives who likely made them create that game will suffer any consequences.
Yeah, I mean, Suicide Squad was their first game in like 9 years.
Yeah,
And
Arkham
then,
Knight
like
was the
after
last one.
how much money and time that went into that, and for it to come out and just kind of, go over about as well as like a fart in church, then you're like, oh man, do you guys? And with how volatile the game industry is now, it's like, do you guys get another chance?
And how volatile Warner Brothers is, like just canceling stuff, removing movies that exist already, and they're taking them off Max, and not releasing the Acme versus
Don't tell them
what is the road? What is it? Acme versus
Coyote versus Acme, whatever it is. Yeah, God, that still hurts. I want to see that movie so bad.
Same thing for like
cool.
the Batgirl movie. Also, it's like these movies were done or very, very close to being done, and they're just like, oh, we can save money on tax write-offs if we cancel it.
Should we have shelved Suicide Squad? Should we maybe with that? Should someone have looked at it like, maybe we just put this in the vault and we just give you guys money to make something that people actually want.
It's just a shame that maybe we're wrong. Maybe this is the game that Rocksteady wanted to make, but it sure doesn't feel like it.
Not all the way, But like again, you see the glimpses in there, but then you can see other stuff, and you're like, this feels like something from a spreadsheet that was emailed to staff from like the higher ups.
I mean, I fully believe that Rocksteady wanted to make a Suicide Squad game, but I think that somebody was like, hey, you know what we could really use? A live service game. And
we're on our bubble. We have not looked at Avengers or any of those other things and said like, I don't know, are we making this harder on ourselves by doing this, just in terms of like fan excitement and perception? Because again, the game could still wind up being great like Helldivers, but that stigma is so strong now. Like the moment you announce your live service game, you are going to be punching uphill for like the entirety of your marketing cycle, and the game better be great. And even then, some people just won't engage with it because either they just don't like live service, or just maybe they do, but they just don't have the time, because, a lot of people have their live service game of choice that consumes their time. And, not everyone has time to have like 2 or 3 different live service games that you got to check in on constantly. You know what I mean?
I think everybody who likes to play live service games has their 1 or 2 that they can keep up with, and then like anything else falls by the wayside. And it just so happens that those games that I mentioned before, the Helldivers, the Fortnites, the Destinies, they take a lot of the oxygen in the room.
Yeah.
And that doesn't leave a whole lot for other parties to enter, Like, I feel like Outriders was kind of like a moderate success.
Yeah.
But,
I forgot about Outriders, and I beat that game.
But like, I have I do a lot of my live service stuff on my phone, like either Marvel Strike Force or Marvel Snap. Like those are the ones that I keep up with. I don't even keep up with Overwatch anymore because I kind of fell off after the review period of Overwatch 2 because I just don't have time for a daily player. Like I'm trying to get through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth right now, doing all the side stuff. I don't have time to check in on 4 different games because they want me to get my dailies.
Well, listen, Brian, Overwatch 2 is adding Porsche. Does that change your mind?
I believe it's pronounced Porsche.
Oh, excuse me, Porsche. Does that get you fired up?
I'm more of a Honda guy myself. But
okay, well, nothing for you here then, I guess.
Okay, well, all right, let's move on from that. Marcus, next up, wouldn't you know it, Nintendo just went and got all litigious again.
Uh-oh. Who? Oh God, who's going to be locked into a bunker for the rest of their lives now?
Well, it didn't go well for Tropic Haze, a group that created emulators for both Switch and 3DS. Nintendo filed a lawsuit against them last week, and Nintendo clearly was not very happy about the fact that these emulators exist. And reading into this a little bit more, it seemed like they were making like, I think it was like thousands upon thousands. I think at its peak, like its Patreon was making like $30,000 a month, something like
Jesus.
that. But just a week after the lawsuit, Tropic Haze released a statement on its Discord and then I think on its larger Twitter account saying that it never meant to encourage piracy. To which I say,
But
right.
you're making money on it though.
And the statement says that the company was started in good faith, which, sure, I can believe that. But it's 2024, and you can't create an emulator and say it's not going to encourage piracy. And
Right.
let me be clear. Let me be clear. I believe in game preservation. I think it's a very important thing, and emulators thankfully do allow for that. Like there are games I've played on emulators just because there is no other way to play them, and I'm grateful for them existing in that way. But I do think it's a little disingenuous to say this is a quote from their statement. Piracy was never our intention, and we believe that piracy of video games and on video game consoles should end.
Yeah, that's either like I don't know. To say like a lie is pretty strong, but like at worst it's a lie, and at best it's just like extremely naive to think that people wouldn't,
Yeah.
take that and run with it. In terms of like, oh, piracy, cool, because it's like, what'd you think was going to happen?
Yeah. So in the wake of this lawsuit, I saw that they hired their own lawyer, and I'm guessing that lawyer advised them to take the following actions because they immediately removed all code repositories from the internet. At least there, I'm sure there's mirrors of it elsewhere. They discontinued their Patreon, they discontinued their Discord server, and closed their websites.
Yeah.
And I understand like the statement because like they probably had to come out in the strongest possible way to condemn piracy in hopes of Nintendo limiting their wrath. But at the same time, it didn't go so well for them because they're settling with Nintendo, paying them $2.4 million in damages, and
Ugh.
have handed the rights to its web domain over to Nintendo.
And we will never see them again. That's the
So
last thing that they don't mention. Like they will never see the
if they're
light of day.
lucky,
Those, so they enter. Like, is it a similar like the payback deal? Is it similar to the one that one guy is like he's basically an indentured servant to Nintendo for the rest of his life, having to pay like they can garnish his wages? Is it that kind of arrangement that they're doing? I
I
guess it
don't
depends
know,
on how
but
much
like
money they have to pay them.
the
But
whole situation sucks because like that guy, I forget his first name. I
Gary
remember,
Bowser.
yeah, Gary Bowser, which
Yeah, that's
is
right.
it's even
Amazing.
funnier somehow than Doug Bowser being the name of the president of
Yeah.
Nintendo of
What
America.
if they were related?
That would be a shocking twist and would make Thanksgiving very, very awkward. But
He gives Doug like $5 every time he sees him.
it's like poison damage in an RPG, just slowly chips away at his health. Um, I think that whole situation sucks because he's also in prison, right?
Yeah, he's I saw a report recently where yeah, he's in jail. I don't know if I think he might have just gotten out, but like I think I saw something saying like while he was in jail, he got paid for like prison work and he had to pay Nintendo like $125 from like his like low paying
Ugh.
prison job just from like that alone and obviously he owes them like millions. So like
Yeah.
yeah, they're saying like, oh yeah, it's begun even while he was in jail. Like, well, this is all I can afford to give you guys based on the percentage of money that you're taking from my paychecks. Uh, so yeah, it's a wrap for him basically.
Yeah. So it sucks that like lives are ruined by this stuff because I don't think emulation in and of itself is bad, but I think that to say piracy was never an intention is a little difficult to believe. But at the same time, like that
I think
sucks to have this hammer come down in this way for something that they have to protect their IP. I get that, and they have to protect like their technology because they don't want Mario Odyssey playable on PC and moddable and everything. But it still is like it seems a little harsh.
yeah, I think the sort of the the breaking point for Nintendo is like the moment you start making money on it in any
Yeah,
way.
probably.
Which, I mean, again, I'm not like necessarily defending Nintendo, but at the same time, if you're making money with emulators, whether you're selling them directly or just like having a Patreon, we're like, hey, just support us and we'll keep making this, which is like, it's like, what do you think's gonna happen? Like that's just like that's skating a fine line where like you're really tempting fate doing that. And I mean, I guess anyone that's doing it now, I would have to wonder if they're looking at themselves going like, maybe we get out while the getting's good,
I mean, I think
before.
that's got to be a component of it is Nintendo kind of making an example to
Oh,
discourage
100%.
others from trying this.
100%. That's probably why they're harsher than maybe they need to be to like they're pretty much trying to scare everybody straight.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, that's got to be a component of it.
Nintendo may as well be like if all the emulator community, like if you lined them all up in a wall, Nintendo's like the inmate that like screams in their face about how scary it is in here and how you don't want this. If we're gonna go with the scare straight comparison, like they're the ones yelling at the emulator dude in like England, being like, "You want to be in jail? You want to pay me $125 every week for the rest of your life? You better cut it out."
You want to be bunkmates with Gary Bowser?
Gary Bowser's in the back, just like slowly shaking his head.
It's like, no, you don't want this life anymore.
Just in
Um,
shackles.
you know, one of the things that Nintendo's also looking into is Pal World. Or I guess the Pokemon company is looking into that. But they never mentioned that they're looking into this other game that we're going to be talking about here, Temtem. Did you ever play that game?
No, I was always curious about it because I remember when it was first announced, it seemed kind of cool. And again, it was one of those like, oh, it seems like they're doing the thing that I've always wanted Pokemon to do, of like this open world sort of like basically like a real open world Pokemon game before Nintendo or Game Freak, whoever finally started doing that.
Yeah, so I saw someone, I think it was Evan over at Kotaku, describe, because everybody described Pal World as Pokemon with guns, and I saw him describe it as Pokemon without guns. Temtem.
Which I guess is Pokemon,
Yeah.
technically.
So
Like,
it's a Pokemon style game, came to Switch in 2022 for those who were not aware, and it's been receiving updates ever since.
yeah, it was in early access for like years.
Yeah, I think 2018 was when it first hit early access, and it's been 4 years until it came out. Former Game Informer editor John Carson reviewed it for us. I think that was his second freelance review he did for us. Or he gave it an 8.5 out of 10 in his review, which is a pretty good score. But it sounds like development is winding down on that game. Developer Crema announced that it will put out its final content update with update 1.8 later this year. But before that, patch 1.7 will add a new season, a new tamer pass, and various smaller changes. And patch 1.7 will also forego any kind of microtransactions and instead make it so that the stuff that they're adding is purchasable by in-game currency, I believe. And then patch 1.8 will let players select past trainer or tamer passes and will also rework the game's economy. So I don't know if I'm going to dive into Temtem. I mean, I played I think I played through like the first, whatever they call them, but
Yeah.
the equivalent of gyms.
Okay.
In that, but I forget what they end up calling them. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to really dive back in, but I just wanted to kind of close that loop on Temtem. I still have to play the Splatoon 3 expansion. Goodness gracious.
Yeah. And Temtem's not shutting down. They're just not
They're
adding
ceasing
more
active
updates.
development. So they're not going to be adding any more like meaningful content updates after patch 1.8.
Yeah, like the game's not disappearing. Like you can still buy and play it if you want to do it, or like if you want to.
Correct.
Yeah, just for people wondering. Because yeah, like I think I don't know if we mentioned it because I think the other thing with Temtem is that it's like an MMO technically, right? Like, isn't it like a shared world thing?
It's a shared world. I don't know if I would go as far to call it an MMO.
Okay, but there is like a multiplayer component to it, though.
Yes.
Yeah, that's surprising because like you said, the game went 1.0 only a couple years ago, so for them to cease adding new content and updates, that's like really soon for something like
but at the
that.
same time, they've been doing active development with the public giving feedback for the past 6 years now.
Yeah, I guess because it has like a live service like kind of like structure to it. Like I don't know how far that goes. I haven't played. I don't know if there's like battle passes or anything like that. But it's
Tamer
just
passes.
maybe, yeah.
That's what they're called. They're called tamer passes.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, you know what I mean. Like, like games like that usually have a long tail of like this is something that we can update basically in perpetuity to
Yeah.
keep players engaged. So it's weird that it's like, oh, you know, it went 1.0 and then like 2 years later or barely 2 years later, it's like, okay, we're done. You're like, oh, really? You weren't just gonna add stuff to this for like to the end of time, basically.
I'm wondering
So-
if Pal World kind of ate its lunch as like the
but that
non-Pokemon.
just came out though. This seems like a decision that would have been made before Power World blew up, right?
I
I don't
don't know. I
know.
mean,
Like maybe the game wasn't selling great over the last year.
it
Like
might have seemed like a slow decline, and then when Power World came out, that might have been like okay, this is the kind of the last straw to break our Temtem's back.
how quickly can we add guns to this game to get them back? How much money is that going to cost?
Well, anyway, Temtem final patch coming out later this year, at least the final like content update later this year. We're gonna wrap up with some happy news.
Okay.
Marcus, we've had a little bit of downer news in this episode between lawsuits and the death of an icon. Happy news here. Back when the Activision Blizzard layoffs hit, it seemed like Toys for Bob, who was the developer behind some of the Crash Bandicoot games, they also did Skylanders, seemed like they were going to be closing. It turns out, much like all things Nintendo, the company is going independent rather than going away.
Oh.
So, Toys for Bob released a note running down its history with Skylanders, Spyro Reignited Trilogy, Crash Bandicoot 4, Crash Team Rumble, before talking about how excited the studio is and mentions that it's exploring a partnership with Microsoft, who, as you know now, owns Activision Blizzard. So that's a somewhat interesting turn there. But Toys for Bob also mentions that it's in the early days of developing a new game, but we won't hear any announcements for quite some time. It does mention that it's excited to develop new stories, new characters, and new gameplay experiences. Did you ever get into any Toys for Bob games?
Uh, I mean, I played Crash 4, which I
Yeah.
really liked. I messed around with Skylanders. Like I never had it, but I had a friend who was like really into Skylanders when like that was like the biggest thing in the world. So the only time I ever messed with him was going to his place and, you know, playing a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I want to say like Crash 4 was probably like the biggest thing I did with them. But you know, I've always respected their work. You know, it's so wild to think like the Skylanders, like what was it, Toys of Life craze was it seems like a million years ago. But it had a very like Guitar Hero-esque like bubble of like there was a period when that was like the thing.
Yeah, people were fighting in the aisles of Target over amiibos.
Yeah, or like it was like amiibos kind of were the result of the success of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like
Disney Infinity.
Yeah, like Nintendo, it like spawned its own subgenre. Nintendo was like, we should get on this. I mean, it's a bit less of a less interactive version of it, but you know, it's got some stuff. And yeah, I mean, that was like what, mid 2010s was like the peak of that.
It was a little bit later than that.
Okay.
I mean, Amiibo started in 2014, and I would say like 2016, 2017 might have been the peak. And then
I feel like it would be
decline.
earlier then, because Amiibos were like, again, Amiibos felt like their answer to that.
But then Disney Infinity started hitting around that time as well. So I mean, yeah, probably mid 2010s then.
Yeah, man, it feels so long ago now.
And it was 10 years ago that Amiibos have been around.
But yeah, I guess in a way, there was a time when Toys for Bob was one of the biggest studios out there because they were the Skylanders team.
Yeah, I mean, at one point, Game Informer had so many toys to life toys that we were like, where are we even going to put these things? We had shelves and shelves and shelves of Disney Infinity, Skylanders, Amiibos, and we had some fun ideas of what to do with them, but none of them ever materialized, unfortunately. But I'm excited to see them continue. They did a really good job with Crash 4, and Crash Team Rumble is fun for what it is.
They did the new Crash Team Racing. Was that them too?
I don't think so, but I might be wrong there. But yeah, Marcus, thank you so much for joining me for this news segment.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Well, you can find me on Elon Musk Presents Twitter, but we call it X, at Marcus Stewart 7, which is the number 7, and you can also find me by that handle on Blue Sky.
We're going to take one final break this episode, and when we get back, we're going to talk all about Unicorn Overlord. We will be right back. Five years ago, Vanillaware released 13 Sentinels to critical acclaim, and now that studio is back with its next title, a tactical RPG with one of the more unique titles that we've had in a while. Unicorn Overlord is out now, and Game Informer's editor-in-chief Matt Miller has spent a lot of time with it. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and happy to have a chance to talk about this game from Vanillaware. I really like that studio, and I've been curious about this one for a long time, since they announced it, even as I've been, like you, a little curious about the choice of name.
Yeah, so just so we can set expectations here about like what you have and haven't played, you're kind of hitting that final stretch, but you're not quite at the point where you're able to review it. So we're not going to say this is like the Matt Miller Game Informer review of Unicorn Overlord, but rather just kind of how you're feeling about this game to this point. And then hopefully sometime next week, we'll be able to read your full review on GameInformer.com. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's coming pretty soon, but I want to finish it, right? It's a big game. There's a lot of stuff to explore, and I think a lot of stuff that we can talk about today, but not quite ready to give it a final evaluation.
Sure. So for those who maybe have heard the name Unicorn Overlord and that name stuck with them for one reason or another, but don't really know much about the game itself, like, can you give like a little bit of like an elevator pitch for what this game is?
Sure. It's a tactical strategy role playing game that borrows from a lot of other titles from the past. I think some people will cite things like Ogre Battle. There's certainly there's a core system at play that draws on Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system. There's some classic kind of Japanese RPG style storytelling stuff. It certainly has art style sort of feel that is in line with what Vanillaware has done in the past, which I think should please a lot of people because it's a really unique and interesting, at this point, almost trademark kind of visual presentation that studio does. But after all the those and other influences come in, it's a pretty distinct project all on its own, right? It's ultimately a tactics game where you are navigating around on a big overworld map and getting to know some characters who are part of your army, and you're leading this big kind of rebellion to retake your this fantasy kingdom, and ultimately expand out to trying to retake this whole fantasy world from an evil empire that has taken over it. And the way that you're doing that is you're gradually building up your army with individual characters who each have different skills. One might be really great at defending against physical attacks, and another might be really great at ranged attacks, and another one has awesome defense against magic. And so you have all that kind of like paper, rock, scissors kind of quality to the individual units, or the combatants rather. And then you put them into units together that will synthesize well and let you move through individual battlefields and complete objectives. Usually retaking a town, or defending a particular location, saving some ally from certain death. It's stuff like that. So there's actually kind of like a real-time strategy element to it, because once it goes from the actual overlord or overworld level, where you're just kind of freely roaming around and finding things and going to towns and visiting and things, the individual battlefields, you're deploying units in real time, and the computer is responding by doing the same. And so you're trying to move your units into position to best halt their advance or make progress on yours. And I think the thing that for a lot of people will feel especially unusual about the game is that once you get down into combat, you don't control anything. It's not like a lot of role playing games or even other tactics games where you're making moment to moment decisions about, like, okay, now I'm going to use this fireball spell, or now I'm going to attack with this particular spear assault or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All those things are determined by tactics that you set up before a battle. Or you can just leave them be and let them kind of do the default thing that they're going to do. That's where it kind of nods to that Final Fantasy 12 Gambit thing. And you're ultimately just seeing how those battles shake out. You even kind of get a preview before the battles start of, like, this is what's going to happen in this fight. If you put this unit up against this unit, your unit's going to take 40 damage, but the other unit's going to be killed. And you will emerge victorious. Like, that information before you get into the combat. So it's ultimately really about, like, using items, abilities, things like that before you get into battle to skew things to your positive result. And then making sure that the units that you throw up against the enemies are the right ones to take them on. And then, you sort of repeat that through many dozens of different battles and situations and stuff that's going on.
It was a very long elevator ride for that pitch.
It was. It's a complicated game, to be fair.
Yeah.
I think that it's different from a lot of things that are out there. It's maybe for that reason that I think some people might really enjoy it, because it's going to feel novel compared to even other tactics or strategy games you might have played recently.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen people say, like, oh, it kind of scratches that Fire Emblem itch, but it seems like it's not as hands-on as Fire Emblem is, especially in terms of, like, its tactical gameplay.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Or maybe a better way to think about it is that both the strategy and tactics that you're going to employ are things that you're establishing ahead of the battle. It's kind of like you're the commander, but you can't ultimately completely control what's going to happen in the battle, right?
Now,
like,
can you change your strategy on the fly?
To some degree, not while once a battle is started, that's just going to happen. It's just going to be what it's going to be. One of the interesting things, and I suspect this will be a thing that I talk about in the review, is that both the overworld visual style as well as the sort of the sort of top down, takes a chunk of the overworld to make any given battlefield that you're then moving around for a given battle, and that you're moving in real time through. That visual style is, a little bit more reminiscent of like old school JRPGs, maybe. I mean, not pixel art or anything, but just like that kind of top-down perspective.
Almost like a Final Fantasy VI, maybe?
Yeah, you could think about it a little bit like that. But then that trademark Vanillaware art style, which is characterized both by kind of like exaggerated musculature and weapons and armor and things like that, and also a certain level of like kind of I think it's often been cited around, like, there's a sort of sexualization a little bit of a lot of the character models. So there's a lot of kind of scantily clad female characters in particular that are running around. That's sort of core to that Vanillaware art style. I don't think it's egregious or overly adult or anything like that, but it's definitely present. That art style, it really only shows up in story cutscenes, which are plentiful, and then in the actual battles themselves that you're not controlling. And so one of the things that starts happening, because mind you, this is like one of those games that you're going to play dozens and dozens of hours of, is that if you're anything like me, you're going to eventually get to a point that during major battles, you often don't even watch that scene play out, where it goes down into the really cool detailed art style and you see, your side and the other side, and they're hitting each other with swords and spells, there's a button that lets you skip that because you know what the result is going to be, and
Mhm.
lets you continue with the battle. And I would be, maybe there's people who are truly devoted and want to just constantly see that. But um, I started to skip a lot of them eventually, just from a perspective of you know making progress through the game in a timely way. Um, so it's an interesting aspect of the project, I guess. So ultimately, I found that a lot of the gameplay takes place in that kind of top down, almost real time strategy thing, real time with pausing, right? Because
Mhm.
you're pausing the game to do stuff there.
Yeah, it seems like such an interesting combination. It almost sounds like the way like Final Fantasy 13's combat worked. I know you compared it to 12, but like
Mm,
13, like where it was you were completely hands off with that. All you did was choose the formations that your
sure.
characters were going into.
Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe I'm getting, even though it's a lot more tactical and less like kind of like the traditional JRPG combat that we might be accustomed to with a game like Final Fantasy 13. But I mean, I guess like how long of a game is this? Because you're saying it's a big game. You're saying that like you're able to skip a lot of like kind of the maybe more repetitive elements of watching a battle that you already know the outcome
hmm
play out. But how long are we talking here?
I've been at it for dozens of hours. I don't always keep exact count, um, because I'm often, I'm coming and sitting down and playing for 2 hours, and then I get pulled away for, something else I got to get done for work, and then I come back and I'm continuing where I paused my game. But it's definitely like, especially if you're engaging with the majority of the battles. And even more so if you're going to sit and like, oh, I like that visual style, I'm going to watch each battle play out. It would take a long time. I think you could shorten it pretty significantly if even from the beginning you were like, I'm just going to skip these, right? I'm
Hmm.
like, I'm here for the gameplay and the strategy, the tactic stuff. Um, but yeah, it's a significant time investment to get through.
Okay. And one of the things that I feel like is so important to these games are the characters and like the cast and everything. Do you feel like this they do a pretty good job with that one?
I do. I like the storytelling in this game. It is very trope driven, and very. It's like very rooted in a familiar style, but in a way that is satisfying and enjoyable. There's a lot of these and thous, right? There's a lot
Hmm.
of long lost brother and sister relationships.
Does the character
Uh,
have amnesia?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if there's anybody who has amnesia, but there are a lot of characters who have been brainwashed, and you turn them back to the good side, right? Like
Okay.
there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So it's not exactly like, oh, this story is going to blow me away. But it is a familiar and satisfying loop of like following this sort of like growing rebel army that's led by this charismatic and kindly prince who's effectively like the stand-in for the player, right? Like that's your guy you're leading around, and meeting any number of different people uh, who are convinced to join the army and continue the march with you. Um, I don't think that if you're looking for like, oh, I want to be really surprised by uh, the story beats here, that's not what you're going to get.
Hmm.
It's definitely like, pretty well know, maybe from even the first few minutes of the game, what the arc of narrative is going to be.
It seems like the two people who are most excited about this game, and people I mean like literally like groups of people, are tactics fans and fans of 13 Sentinels. Like I feel like a lot of people saw that this was from Vanillaware and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I love 13 Sentinels. I want to check that game out." Is there any other group that you think should maybe look into this game?
I think fans of like high fantasy, that sort of high fantasy storytelling that I was just talking about, where you're like, I know what I'm in for here, right? I'm not trying to be surprised. I'm looking for kind of a classical fantasy story told with wizards and dragons and griffins and uh, lightning blasts and evil emperors and that kind of thing. I mean, like, that's a vibe, and sometimes that's what you're looking for. I think you'd find a lot to be satisfied with here. I also think that it's, for all of its complexity and all of the many systems that it's playing with, and there are a lot that I'm not talking about here, right? I mean, there's things around upgrades and how you set up your tactics and your equipment and your leveling and your the things you pick up in the overworld to deliver to towns to increase your honor. Like, there's all kinds of stuff going on here, but they do a great job of explaining it and making it approachable. So I actually don't think that it's a game that should scare people off. I think sometimes tactics and strategy games have that dilemma to them,
Mm-hmm.
where people who aren't really familiar with it are like, oh, I can't do that. I don't get it. This game has a very clear ramp, and the early hours, which, by the way, I'll add, there's a very extensive free demo that you can play that is like something like, I think you can get a good like 5 to 7 hours worth of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Those early hours introduce a lot of the core ideas, and as new units come in, they you get to understand, okay, well, this is this new elven archer class, and this is what they do, and this is what they're strong against, and that kind of thing. Probably the biggest challenge that you're eventually dealing with is there's so many classes and there's so many distinct characters that keeping them all straight is a real challenge. The way around that, if you want a little bit of a pro tip here, is that you want to kind of diversify most of your units with different combatant types. Or if you're not completely diversifying, at least try to have some ways to shore up the core weakness of a particular unit. So, for instance, like I have a ranged unit that is almost all archers of one type or another. Some of them are good at archers that overcome magical defense. Some of them are ones that overcome physical defense, whatever. But then I have a guy with a big shield who stands in the front, who keeps them safe, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have to think about like the way that you set up those units, and that's a big part of the challenge. Is like you're eventually like, I can't even remember what this class does, but it'd be boring if there wasn't something that you needed to pay attention to.
Yeah. So, do we ever find out why it's called Unicorn Overlord? Does it ever like click like, oh, that's why it's called that?
Yeah, that comes into play pretty early. It has to do with the storytelling and a special magic ring that the main character has, and sort of a little bit of a nod to some of the like religious stuff in this fantasy world, like the the things that the characters are being sort of magically called to protect, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the unicorn part. And the overlord is just like, you gotta become this sort of high lord who gathers up your army and ultimately takes it to the bad guy.
All right. And I know you have not finished the game. You're not ready to deliver your final review, but it's safe to say you're pretty positive on this game.
I'm pretty positive on it. I think it does have the potential, because it is so long, and because there are some aspects of it that are kind of like, okay, well, I've done this a lot of times before. I've rescued a town at this point 36 times already. So doing some of the loops of activities can be a little bit repetitive after, maybe not after the first 10 hours, but after 30 hours, maybe. But I think they do a good job of making sure that the main battles that you go into often have really unusual and new challenges that you've got to overcome. And that's how it keeps it fresh. And that, combined with the great art style, the interesting mix of inspirations that they're drawing from, and that kind of classical high fantasy trope-driven storytelling, I think adds up to being something that's a lot of fun.
Well, that's great to hear. If people, as you mentioned in one of your comments there, there is a demo available right now. Gives you a pretty significant chunk of the early hours of the game. And something you neglected to mention, though, is that all your progress transfers over to the full game if you do decide to buy it after that demo ends, which I've got to tell you, it's one of the only ways I will play a demo these days, because I just don't want to replay large parts of a game. I mean, I think it was like you who played Final Fantasy 15 for like 13 hours for a preview or something, and then it came out and you were like, I gotta tell you, I don't want to play through those first 13 hours of Final Fantasy 15 again, even though I enjoyed them.
Yeah, I don't think that was me, but I have had that circumstance a few times. I recall, I wish I could remember which one of our old teammates that might have been. Maybe somebody will remind us in the comments, but I think that can happen, even outside of professional games coverage like this. It would not be a lot of fun to have to play the early 7 hours of kind of almost tutorial oriented Unicorn Overlord and then start over. But that is not the case. They let you just keep going. So it's ideal, really. It's a great way. I think it was a really smart decision on whoever made that call for this game. Because it's a new franchise, right? And I think there are people who are familiar with Vanillaware, and there's starting to be more people who are like, oh, I really like their style and their approach to games. But nobody knows what Unicorn Overlord is. And let's be honest, like, I don't know that name is doing them a lot of favors in terms of drawing people in. I think there's a lot of people who are like, what are you playing? What is that called? Right? Like,
it sounds like a fake game name that
like
somebody in like an anime would be playing.
Right. But I promise it's a real game. And like, if you go check out the demo, I think you'll pretty quickly get the feeling for what they're kind of throwing down. And I, for one, I like it. I like Vanillaware, and I'm thrilled to see them bring another game to market. And I'm glad that this one has a lot of kind of interesting complexity to it and depth. I suspect that, especially for the high difficulty, this is the sort of game that some people could play for a really long time, playing around with the setting up your character's tactics and weapons and synthesizing units that, this is my unit that takes advantage of flame attacks, and this is my unit that just can't ever get hurt, right? Like, there's some cool things you can play with there. Anyway, it's a cool project.
Well, we will look forward to your review. Keep your eyes on GameInformer.com in the coming days for Matt's full review. Unicorn Overlord, though, out now on not just Switch, though. It's on PlayStation and Xbox as well, if you'd like to check it out over there. I know, Matt, you have been playing the PlayStation version, but it's the same game on Switch. So if you want a portable version, then maybe check out the Switch version. But Matt, thank you so much for joining me to tell me all about your time with Unicorn Overlord.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate the chance to share my enthusiasm.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at allthingsnintendo@GameInformer.com or hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea. You can also join the Game Informer Community Discord, which is a perk for subscribing to our Twitch channel, even just for 1 month. Matt, tell people where they can find you on the internet.
Oh, I usually let Game Informer's social channels speak for themselves. I'm not big in there myself. So, always reach out if you have something specific you want to ask me about. You can just email me, which is at miller@gameinformer.com. Other than that, your best chance to touch base is to do things to reach out to Game Informer's editor-in-chief, or just send responses to our replies and our feedback channels, and it will eventually make its way over in my direction.
That is our show for this week. Thank you all again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.